I didn't know my life would split into a before and an after because of one speech at a hotel ballroom, delivered by a woman who was technically my employee and a man who was technically my husband. The chandelier light was too warm, too flattering, the kind that makes champagne look like gold and lies look like confidence. I wasn't supposed to be visible that night. I stood behind a marble pillar near the back of the room, fingers curled around a water glass I hadn't touched, listening to laughter ripple across polished floors. On the stage, the CEO of Summit Industries, Rita Morrison, 51, silver hair swept back, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car, smiled like she owned the air. She began with praise. She applauded my husband, Jordan Hayes, calling him the new director of operations. 7 years of loyalty. A 42% increase in profit margins. A revolution in efficiency, she said, and the crowd clapped like trained hands. Then Rita tilted her head, letting the applause fade into silence. And what impresses me most, she continued, voice sweet as dessert, is how Jordan achieved all of this despite significant challenges at home. My stomach tightened so fast it felt like my body had made a decision without asking me. Rita paused, just long enough to make people lean in. Most of us go home to supportive partners, she said, people who understand ambition. Jordan goes home to something quite different. A laugh popped somewhere near the front, then another. Rita smiled wider. His wife is simple, just a warehouse worker, no education. Sweet, I'm sure, but not exactly, she let the word hang there, stimulating. The laughter built. A few people even clapped, and across the room, my husband took it. Chin lifted, shoulders relaxed, like this was a compliment. Like I was a harmless joke that made him look bigger. Then Jordan accepted the microphone, chuckling. She's not bad, he said. She means well. But honestly, coming home after days like this and having to explain everything in simple terms because she just doesn't get it, it's exhausting. I felt my pulse hit my throat. That was the moment I stepped out from behind the pillar. Jordan saw me when I was 10 feet away, and his face turned the color of erased ink because they had no idea. No one in that ballroom knew that Summit Industries, every warehouse, every factory, every share belonged to me, and I was done being his punchline. I'm Elena Hayes, 42 years old, the kind of woman people look through when I'm dressed plainly, until they need something, or until they learn a name that changes their posture. For most of my adult life, I chose to be invisible on purpose. Not because I lacked confidence, because I was raised by a man who taught me that power is safest when it's quiet. My grandfather founded Summit Industries in 1962. Back when manufacturing wasn't a buzzword, it was smoke in your lungs, steel under your nails, long nights where success meant keeping the lights on one more week. He built it from nothing, then built it into an empire that people in business journals loved to romanticize. But he never romanticized it. He called it responsibility. When he died, my family expected the company to become a trophy passed between loud men in boardrooms. Instead, it became mine. Not in a dramatic reading of the will way, no pearls clutched, no shouting. It happened in meetings and signatures, in lawyers' offices that smelled like polished wood and expensive patience. Shares transferred, voting rights secured. A structure designed to keep the company stable. By my late 20s, I was the majority shareholder, and almost nobody knew. I let the CEO run the public face, let executives make speeches, let people assume I was some ordinary woman who had married into a modest life. I didn't correct them, because correcting people is a kind of performance, and I was tired of being watched. I wanted a marriage where I was loved as a person, not a prize. That's how I ended up with Jordan. I met him when I was 22. I still remember the setting with humiliating clarity. A charity supply drive Summit sponsored, one of those good optics events. I had shown up late, hair pulled back, no makeup, wearing a hoodie because I'd driven in from a meeting and didn't feel like being anyone. Jordan was there, loading boxes into a truck, laughing with the volunteers like it was easy for him to exist in the world. "Careful," he said, hands steady on the box. "You'll throw out your back." I smirked. I'm tougher than I look. His eyes flicked up, warm and uncomplicated. "Yeah," he said, like he believed it. "I can tell." That was what got me. Not his looks, though he was handsome in an effortless way. Not his job. He worked in logistics then, later moved into warehouse operations. It was the way he didn't ask me to prove anything. We dated fast. Too fast. I know that now. Jordan came from a family that believed love meant loyalty, and loyalty meant staying, no matter what. His sister Claire adored him. Their parents were polite to me, but I always felt like a guest in their world, someone they hadn't approved but tolerated because Jordan wanted me. And I tried. God, I tried. When we got married, I suggested something simple: a small venue, a modest budget. Jordan insisted that was my style. Humble, no fuss. Like modesty was my identity, not my choice. I didn't correct him, because I thought the secrecy was protecting us. I kept Summit hidden the way you keep a family scar hidden under clothing, because it's private, and because once people see it, they start touching it with their opinions. We built a life that looked ordinary, a house in Westchester that wasn't flashy, vacations that were nice but not obscene, cars that didn't scream money. We raised 4 kids inside that illusion: Tyler and Sophie, our older 2, then Kyle and Emma. And for a long time, Jordan played his role well. He told people I worked around warehouses. He let them assume I was just an employee. He'd squeeze my hand at parties and call me grounding, like I existed to soften his edges. I thought it was love. But looking back, the warning signs were there. Small, easy to excuse. The way he'd correct me in public with a laugh. The way he'd introduce me without my name. "This is my wife," he'd say, like that was enough. And the way his ambition slowly changed shape. At first, he was proud of his career. Then he became hungry. And hunger makes people choose an audience over a marriage, especially when they start believing they deserve applause more than they deserve honesty. The night of that gala wasn't the beginning. It was the first time I finally stopped pretending it was still the same man I married. If I'm honest, the shift didn't happen all at once. It began quietly, like condensation forming on glass. You don't notice it at first. Then one day, the window is fogged and you can't see clearly anymore. About 3 years before the gala, Jordan changed. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would justify panic. He started coming home later. At first, it was efficiency meetings, then strategy sessions, then executive dinners. His tone shifted when he spoke about Summit, less about teamwork, more about positioning. "They don't see the bigger picture," he'd say at the kitchen counter, loosening his tie. "I do." I would ask gently, "What bigger picture?" He'd smile in a way that felt rehearsed. "You wouldn't get into the weeds like this. It's corporate stuff." I remember the first time that sentence stung. You wouldn't get into the weeds. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't loud. It was dismissive in a soft, socially acceptable way. The kind that lets a woman question whether she imagined it. Then came Rita Morrison. Rita had been CEO for years. Brilliant, disciplined, controlled. I had appointed her myself. She was effective, sharp, respected. She knew how to run a room without raising her voice. Jordan began mentioning her more often. "Rita sees potential in me. Rita says I have leadership instincts. Rita thinks the operations division needs someone aggressive." Aggressive. He started wearing sharper suits. Started talking about restructuring departments he'd once respected. Started referring to Summit as if it were something to conquer rather than something to steward. At dinners with his colleagues, I watched him carefully. He laughed louder around them, interrupted me when I spoke. One evening at a small company celebration, someone asked what I did. Before I could answer, Jordan chuckled. "She keeps things simple," he said. "Ground level, warehouse stuff." There it was again. Simple. The word landed lightly in the air. No one objected. A few nodded politely, and I let it pass, because correcting him would have exposed everything. Because if I said, "Actually, I own the company you all work for," I would have turned the entire dynamic inside out. I would have humiliated him publicly. And I loved him then. Or at least, I loved the man I believed he was. Around that same time, his sister Claire started making small comments. "You're lucky Jordan's moving up," she'd say. "Some men outgrow their environments." I'd smile. "We grow together." She'd tilt her head. Of course. It wasn't overt hostility. It was something subtler, like they were preparing me for a version of him that didn't need me anymore. Then I noticed something else. Jordan stopped asking about my day. Stopped asking anything, really. Instead, he explained his day to me. In detail. With an edge. Rita says leadership means making hard calls. I can't stay small forever. Small. The irony of that word nearly makes me laugh now. I remember one night in particular. He was pacing the living room, phone in hand, frustrated. "They don't understand scale," he muttered. "They're thinking too conservatively." I asked softly, "Who is they?" "The board, investors, people who don't want change." My heartbeat slowed in a strange, cold way, because I was the majority shareholder. If decisions were being discussed at that level and I wasn't informed, it meant something was happening beneath the surface. Something strategic, something deliberate. But I didn't confront him then. Instead, I watched how Rita's name appeared more often in his messages, watched how he began defending her before I even questioned her, watched how he started referring to my company less and the company more. The final seed was planted 2 months before the gala. Jordan came home unusually animated. "They're considering me for director of operations," he said, breathless. "It's a massive leap." I smiled genuinely. "That's impressive." He looked at me, not warmly, evaluating. "You don't understand what this means." I held his gaze. "Try me." He hesitated, then shrugged. "It means I'm not just warehouse level anymore." And there it was again. Warehouse. Simple. Small. He didn't know he was standing across from the woman who had signed the documents approving the very restructuring plan that created that position. He didn't know I'd already seen internal shifts in financial patterns. Didn't know I'd quietly started asking questions of my own. But that night, something inside me shifted, not suspicion. Clarity. The gala wasn't random humiliation. It was the culmination of a story Jordan had been telling about me for years. And I was about to hear the ending out loud. The ballroom smelled like citrus polish and expensive perfume. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead. A string quartet played something forgettable near the back wall. Servers moved in silent choreography, refilling champagne flutes for people who believed this night was about ambition. It was, just not in the way they thought. I had arrived unannounced. No one expected the warehouse wife. I stood behind a marble pillar as Rita Morrison took the stage, her voice smooth and commanding. She praised Jordan's 7 years of dedication, highlighted the 42% increase in operational efficiency, called him visionary. The applause was enthusiastic. Jordan stood near the front, shoulders squared, chin lifted, basking in it. Then Rita shifted her tone. "What truly sets Jordan apart," she said, "is his resilience. Not everyone has a supportive home environment." A few polite laughs. She continued, smiling lightly. "While most of us return home to partners who understand ambition and strategy, Jordan goes home to someone less corporate." The room warmed with amusement. "My understanding," she added delicately, "is that his wife works in one of our warehouses. Sweet, I'm sure, but not exactly an intellectual sparring partner." The laughter came in waves. Not cruel, not vicious. Worse. Casual. Jordan didn't interrupt. He smiled. Rita stepped back slightly and gestured to him. "It takes strength to rise above limitations at home." More applause. He chuckled. "She means well," he said, voice light. "Elena's a good person, but explaining high-level strategy after days like this, It's like translating from a language she doesn't speak. Sympathetic nods. It can be exhausting, he finished. My pulse slowed into something steady and cold. I watched his face. He wasn't nervous. He believed this narrative, believed it was safe, believed I would never step out of the shadows I had chosen for myself. That was the moment something inside me went completely still. I set my untouched water glass on a passing tray. Then I stepped out. The sound of my heels across polished marble echoed more sharply than the quartet's violin. People began turning halfway through my walk. Brows furrowed. Security glanced toward me, uncertain. Jordan saw me when I was 10 feet away. His smile dropped first. Then the color drained from his face. Rita looked annoyed at the interruption. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage without asking permission. Jordan's hand tightened around the microphone. I extended mine calmly. May I? He hesitated half a second too long. I took it anyway. I turned to face the crowd. My name is Elena Hayes, I said, voice even. The warehouse worker. The simple wife. The room went quiet. Breath holding quiet. I looked at Rita first. That was a compelling speech. She didn't answer. I shifted my gaze across the ballroom, letting silence stretch. The interesting thing, I continued softly, about Summit Industries is that ownership doesn't always sit where people expect. A flicker of confusion rippled outward. Jordan swallowed. I felt his panic before I saw it. Summit Industries, I said clearly, is owned by Hayes Holdings. Founded by my grandfather in 1962. A few executives stiffened. Rita's expression shifted, subtle, but there. And I finished, am the majority shareholder. The silence turned absolute. You could hear someone inhale too sharply near the front. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize. I simply continued. Every warehouse, every factory, every share of stock. My eyes settled briefly on Rita. You are technically my employee. Then to Jordan. And so is my husband. Jordan let out a short, brittle laugh. She's joking, he said quickly. I'm not. I reached into my clutch and withdrew a folded document, not theatrically. Matter of fact. A certified shareholder declaration with the company's seal. Rita stared at it. Color drained from her face. Her composure cracked just enough to reveal fear. I wasn't informed, she said quietly. Of course you weren't, I replied. I chose not to inform you. Jordan stepped closer to me, voice low and urgent. Elena, stop. I turned slightly toward him. Stop what? I asked. Translating? A few uncomfortable coughs echoed through the room. Rita's authority evaporated visibly. The applause from earlier now felt obscene in the silence. Jordan's breathing had become shallow. You're humiliating me, he whispered. I looked at him steadily. No, I said softly. You did that. I stepped back toward the podium and set the microphone down with controlled precision. I've spent 20 years living small, I said, voice calm, so my husband could feel tall. I let that settle. And tonight, I added, I'm done shrinking. I stepped off the stage. The crowd parted instinctively. No one touched me. No one stopped me. Behind me, I heard Rita begin stammering. Jordan's voice followed, sharp, frantic, but I didn't turn around. I walked out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, into the cold October air. My phone began ringing before I reached the car. Jordan. Again. And again? I watched his name flash on the screen. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't answer because something irreversible had just happened. And this wasn't about pride. And truth was only beginning. I didn't drive home. I couldn't. The idea of walking into that house, into framed photos of beach vacations and birthday candles and smiling Christmas mornings, felt unbearable. I needed distance. Not from the house, from the illusion. I drove north on Highway 87 with the windows cracked open, letting the October air slice across my face. It was cold enough to sting. I welcomed it. My phone kept lighting up on the passenger seat. Jordan. 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 Then Rita. Then unknown numbers. I let it ring. Around 9:30, I pulled into a rest stop and turned off the engine. The silence inside the car felt heavier than the ballroom had. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was clear. A different number flashed across the screen.
Claire,
I answered. What did you do? She demanded immediately. Not angry, panicked. It's everywhere. Someone recorded it. It's already online. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the seat. Is he okay? She asked, softer now. I almost laughed. Is he okay? He says you destroyed his career, she said quietly. I let that sit between us. I didn't destroy anything, I replied. I corrected a narrative. Claire exhaled sharply. Come to our place. You shouldn't be alone tonight. I hesitated. I wanted to sit in the dark, to process, to feel whatever was waiting behind the composure. But she was right. I was still angry, and angry decisions can scorch everything. Fine, I said. I'm coming. Before I left the rest stop, I did one thing. I sent Jordan a message. Stay at the house tonight. I'll collect my things tomorrow. Don't call me again. I turned off my phone completely after that. The drive to Ridgefield blurred past in headlights and reflective road signs. Claire was waiting on the porch when I arrived. She didn't ask questions. She just wrapped her arms around me. That was when the first crack appeared. Not tears, just a tightening in my throat I had to swallow down. Inside, her husband Daniel had made coffee, though it was almost midnight. We sat at the kitchen table like it was any other evening. Except no one pretended this was normal. Claire folded her hands in front of her. Start at the beginning, she said gently. No more protecting him. So I did. I told her about the speech, the laughter, Jordan's words, the way he'd said, exhausting. Claire's jaw tightened. He said that? She asked. Yes. Daniel shook his head slowly. That's not a slip, he said. That's belief. That word landed harder than anything else. Belief. I went upstairs to the guest room around 2 a.m, but sleep didn't come. I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying the past 3 years in a different light. Every you wouldn't understand. Every introduction without my name. Every time he'd positioned himself as rising above me. Had he been ashamed all along? Or had the ambition changed him? Around 3, I gave up and went downstairs. Daniel was already awake, pouring coffee like he'd expected me. We sat at the island in silence for a while. Then I said the thing I hadn't said out loud yet. The worst part isn't the humiliation. He glanced at me. It's that he meant it. Daniel didn't interrupt. He's been embarrassed of me for years, I continued. I thought we had an understanding. I thought he knew who I really was. Daniel stirred his coffee slowly. He did know, he said quietly. He just preferred the version that made him bigger. That truth hit deeper than the public betrayal. The sun rose around 6. By then, Claire had her laptop open. It's trending, she said carefully. Business journals picked it up. Local news, too. They're calling it the hidden owner reveal. I almost smiled. Spectacle. That's what the world sees. They don't see the private fracture. My phone had been off for hours. When I finally turned it back on, it vibrated violently in my hand. 73 missed calls, 200 plus messages, emails stacking by the second, most from Jordan, a few from board members, a handful from reporters. Then Claire said something that made my stomach drop. The kids tried calling you last night. I went still. Tyler. Sophie. Kyle. Emma. They would have seen the video, seen their father mocked, seen their mother reveal ownership. They would have questions, hard ones. Claire closed her laptop gently. What are you going to tell them? She asked. I exhaled slowly. The truth. But truth has layers. And for the first time in 20 years, I would have to peel all of them back. I called Tyler first. He picked up on the first ring. Mom, is it true? No greeting, no hesitation. Just a 16-year-old trying to steady his voice. Do you own Summit? Yes, I said quietly. It's true. Silence. Then, Dad said you humiliated him because you were jealous. I closed my eyes for a second. I wasn't jealous, I replied. I was correcting something that shouldn't have been said. He didn't argue. But he didn't defend me either. We saw the video, he said. Everyone at school has seen it. Of course they had. I want to talk in person, I told him. All of you. Today. He agreed. When I drove back to the house that morning, Jordan's car was gone. The driveway looked the same. The lawn was trimmed, the curtains half open. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. The house still smelled like my perfume from the night before. Family photos lined the walls. Tyler with a missing front tooth, Sophie in ballet shoes, Kyle in a baseball uniform, Emma holding a glitter-covered art project. I stood in the entryway for a long moment. How much of this had been real? Upstairs, I packed a small suitcase. Clothes, documents, my laptop. That's when I saw the shoebox. Pushed behind Jordan's winter boots on his side of the closet, something in me went cold. I pulled it out and sat on the edge of the bed. Inside were letters, dozens, all on Summit Industries letterhead, all signed by Rita Morrison. My heart didn't race. It slowed. The first letter was dated 3 years ago. The other night was incredible, it began. We have to be more careful. I read until my vision blurred. Hotel names, times, plans, references to my travel schedule, and then a line that made my hand tighten around the paper. Once you're director, we'll have the leverage we need. Leverage on my company, on me. My chest felt hollow. 3 years. 3 years of an affair between my husband and my CEO. 3 years of strategic positioning. 3 years of them laughing at the simple wife. I gathered every letter and placed them back in the box. When I met the kids at a diner at noon, they were already seated. Tyler sat upright, jaw tight. Sophie's expression was controlled but sharp. Kyle avoided eye contact. Emma looked confused more than angry. I slid into the booth across from them. I'm sorry you found out the way you did, I began. Sophie leaned forward. Why didn't you tell us? I swallowed. I wanted you to grow up normal, I said, without money shaping how people treated you, without entitlement. So you lied? Tyler asked flatly. I kept something private, I replied. I thought I was protecting you. Sophie shook her head slightly. It doesn't feel like protection. They were right. Protection without consent feels like deception. Tyler hesitated before speaking again. Dad says you ruined his promotion, that you embarrassed him in front of everyone. I held his gaze. Your father allowed his boss to mock me publicly, then agreed with her. Kyle's head snapped up at that. He said that? Yes. Emma's eyes filled with tears. But he loves you, she whispered. I looked at her gently. Love doesn't humiliate someone for applause. We sat in heavy silence for a moment. Then Sophie spoke carefully. Is there more? There was. I could feel it pressing against my ribs, but I didn't unload everything yet. Your father and I are having serious problems, I said instead. Adult problems, and they're not because of jealousy. Tyler studied my face. What happens now? I don't know, I answered honestly, but I won't lie to you again. That was the first escalation. The second came 3 days later. I hired a private investigator. I needed confirmation before I moved. When the photos came back, they were clinical. Jordan and Rita entering the Riverside Inn every Thursday afternoon for 3 years. Same room, fake names, receipts, bank transfers. Then the financial report slid across the desk. $20,000 per month, 2 years. From discretionary Summit accounts into an offshore account. Account holder, Jordan Hayes. My husband had been stealing from my own company. $500,000. The room felt smaller, not because of the money, because this wasn't impulsive betrayal. This was planned. Then came the final blow. DNA tests. I don't even remember agreeing out loud. But the investigator had asked gently, "Do you want certainty?" Yes, Kyle was 12, Emma was 10. The timeline overlapped. I needed to know. 5 days later, the results arrived. Tyler, 99.9% mine. Sophie, 99.9% mine. Kyle, 0%. Emma, 0%. The air left my lungs so completely, I thought I might pass out. 12 years. 10 years. I had braided Emma's hair for school, taught Kyle how to throw a curveball, stayed up through fevers, read bedtime stories, and Jordan and Rita had known. The betrayal expanded in every direction at once. Marriage, business, motherhood. Identity. When I called a family meeting, Jordan was already there with the kids. His face was tight with fury. "You had no right to test them," he snapped. "I had every right," I replied calmly. I held the papers in my hand. The children looked between us, confused. "I learned something," I said gently. Jordan stepped forward. "Don't you dare." I looked at him steadily. "They deserve the truth." And that was the moment escalation stopped being private. Because once truth enters a room, it changes the oxygen. Kyle stared at me as I explained. Emma began crying immediately. Tyler's expression shifted from shock to something harder. Sophie looked at her father like she had never seen him before. Jordan exploded. "You're destroying them!" "No," I said evenly. "You did." He pointed at me, voice shaking. "You're doing this because your pride was hurt." I laughed once, without warmth. "My pride?" I asked softly. "You've been sleeping with my CEO for 3 years, stealing from my company, planning leverage, and you think this is about pride?" His face went white. The kids heard that part. All of it. And that was the true escalation. Not the gala, not the reveal, but the collapse of the story we'd been living inside. And it was about to get worse. I thought the worst part would be the courtroom, or the headlines, or even the DNA results. It wasn't. The worst part was the night the hospital lights flickered over my son's pale face. It was 2 weeks after the DNA reveal. 2:07 pagi. My phone rang beside the bed at Claire's house. Tyler's name. I answered before it could ring twice. "Mom," his voice cracked. "It's Kyle. He took Dad's car. He crashed. We're at Mercy Hospital." The world tilted sideways. I don't remember grabbing my coat. I don't remember the drive. I only remember the way the emergency room doors slid open and the smell of antiseptic hit my lungs like punishment. Tyler stood in the waiting area, pale and shaking. Sophie had her arm around Emma, who was sobbing silently. Jordan sat several feet away, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I didn't look at him. "What happened?" I asked. Tyler swallowed. "Kyle's been sneaking out at night, ever since you told us." The words cut deeper than anything shouted in a ballroom. "He said driving helped him think," Sophie whispered. "We didn't know he'd take Dad's keys tonight." Jordan finally spoke. "This is what you did," he said hoarsely. "You dropped a bomb on a 12-year-old. I turned slowly. "He was living inside a lie," I said. "I didn't create that." Jordan stood up, anger trembling through him. "You could have waited. You could have protected him." I stepped closer, voice low but steady. "Protected him from what? Reality? Or from your choices?" Before he could answer, the surgeon walked out. "Leg broken in 3 places, concussion, possible internal bleeding," she said. "We're operating now." The next 3 hours were endless. Every beep from the operating room monitor felt like judgment. Emma clung to Sophie. Tyler stared at the wall like he could will himself not to feel. Jordan paced. And for the first time since the gala, the composure cracked. I sat down hard in the plastic hospital chair and pressed my hands to my face. Had I been too abrupt? Had I mistaken honesty for timing? Had I confused strength with urgency? The questions were relentless. When the surgeon returned and said Kyle was stable, relief nearly dropped me to the floor. They let me see him first. He looked small in the hospital bed, smaller than 12. His leg suspended in traction, bruises blooming across his cheekbone. "Hey, sweetheart," I whispered. His good eye opened slowly. "Mom," he said, voice rough. "I'm here." He blinked. "I wasn't trying to crash," he whispered. "I just needed to get away." I pulled a chair close and took his hand carefully. "I know." His jaw trembled. "Everything feels fake now." There it was, the sentence I had feared most. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Your life isn't fake," I said gently. "Some people made bad choices, but you're still exactly who you've always been." He stared at the ceiling. "Am I his?" he asked. The question hung in the air. "Biology, blood, ownership." "No," I said softly, "but you are mine." He turned his head slightly. "Even if the test says I'm not?" I leaned closer. "Being a mother isn't a test result. It's 12 years of showing up. It's every scraped knee and every late night fever and every baseball game. I chose you every day. That doesn't change." His eyes filled. "But I feel like I broke something." "You didn't," I said firmly. "You didn't break this family. Adults did." When he fell asleep, I stayed there long after. Outside the room, Jordan was waiting. "Can I see him?" he asked quietly. I studied his face. Not anger now. Fear. "He needs rest," I said. "He's my son." I met his eyes. "And whose choice made him question that?" He flinched. That was the dark truth. The accident wasn't just about the DNA. It was about identity. About a 12-year-old trying to outrun a narrative that had collapsed under him. The next morning, when I stepped outside the hospital for air, I realized something with painful clarity. The marriage was over. Not because of humiliation, not because of betrayal, but because my children were bleeding from secrets that should never have existed. And I had to decide what kind of mother I would be now. The one who protects appearances, or the one who protects truth. Standing there in the gray morning light, watching traffic blur past, I understood something else. Jordan and Rita hadn't just betrayed me. They had destabilized the very foundation of my children's sense of self. And that was something I would never forgive. That was the moment the grief turned into resolve. Not rage, resolve. Because this story wasn't about pride. It was about accountability. And accountability was coming. The turning point didn't feel dramatic. It didn't come with shouting or slamming doors. It came quietly on a gray Tuesday morning when I sat in my attorney's office holding a small silver flash drive. It had been delivered by courier, no return address, but I already knew who it was from. Jordan had requested a private meeting 2 days earlier. I almost refused, but my lawyer advised me to listen. "He may be trying to negotiate," she said. We met at a neutral office building in White Plains. Jordan looked different, not broken. Exposed. His suit hung looser than it used to. The confident edge he once wore like cologne was gone. He didn't waste time pretending. "She's going to claim you were financially controlling," he said flatly. "Emotionally isolating. That she felt trapped." I studied him calmly. "Was she?" He didn't answer that. "She's building a narrative," he continued, "that the affair and the money were survival." Survival. The word made my chest tighten. "You're telling me this out of kindness?" I asked. He shook his head once. "No. I'm telling you because she's positioning everything to fall on me." So there it was. Not remorse. Self-preservation. He slid the flash drive across the table. "She controlled the offshore accounts," he said. "Passwords, transfers, conversations. Everything's here." I didn't reach for it immediately. "Why now?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Because the moment things collapsed, she threw me under the bus, told investigators I manipulated her, that she was influenced, that she had no idea about the financial details." "And you?" I asked quietly. He let out a humorless breath. "I loved her," he said. "I was stupid." There was something broken in his voice, but not enough to undo what had been done. "Are Kyle and Emma yours?" I asked directly. His silence lasted too long. Then, yes. No denial, no excuse, just fact. "She told me 3 years ago," he added. "Said we had to be careful. Said once she secured her position, we'd figure it out." Figure it out. My children were a future plan to him, not people. I finally picked up the flash drive. "This doesn't make us even," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. That was the last time we spoke privately. Back at my lawyer's office, we loaded the contents. Bank statements, email threads, explicit discussions of restructuring Summit in ways that would grant Rita executive leverage and funnel discretionary funds towards shell accounts. Not just an affair, not just theft. A strategic attempt to gain operational control. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Up until then, I had been reacting. Now I moved. We filed motions immediately. Account freezes. Asset recovery. Formal criminal complaints for embezzlement and fraud. Not because I wanted revenge, because this wasn't marital betrayal anymore. It was corporate crime, and I had fiduciary responsibility. When Rita was served papers at Summit headquarters, she reportedly turned pale in the middle of a meeting. When Jordan's accounts were frozen, he called once, voice tight, angry. "You didn't have to go this far." "Yes," I said calmly. "I did." Meanwhile, the kids were healing in uneven waves. Tyler became quieter, observant. Sophie asked sharper questions. Emma started therapy twice a week. Kyle's leg healed slowly, but the deeper fracture, identity, took longer. One evening, about a month after the accident, Kyle sat across from me at the kitchen table. "Are you going to send them to prison?" he asked. I didn't lie. "I'm pursuing the legal process," I said gently. He nodded. "Okay." He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked up. "I don't want another dad," he said firmly. The words hit me harder than the DNA report ever had. "You don't have one," I replied softly. "I know," he said. "I'm just saying." That was the real turning point. Not the flash drive, not the court filings, but that moment. When a 12-year-old chose me, chose history over biology, chose love over blood, and I realized something with absolute certainty. It was about stabilizing my children's world, about rebuilding it with honesty. No more secrets, no more shrinking, no more curated narratives. When the trial date was set 6 months out, I didn't feel dread. I felt prepared, because for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't hiding. And when you stop hiding, power feels different. Not loud, grounded, steady, and unshakable. The trial lasted 9 days. It felt longer. Courtrooms don't look dramatic in real life. They're beige, fluorescent, paper heavy. The drama lives in what people say under oath and what they can't unsay. Rita sat at the defense table in tailored suits that tried to project composure. Jordan sat beside her some days, separate counsel, separate strategy. They barely looked at each other. When the prosecution laid out the financial trail, monthly transfers, shell accounts, internal emails discussing leverage once positioned, the courtroom air changed. Not explosive, inevitable. Rita's attorney attempted the emotional angle first. They called 3 former colleagues who testified that I had seemed distant at company functions, that Jordan had occasionally joked about keeping things simple at home, that Rita had confided feeling unsupported, as if humiliation were a form of neglect. Then came the therapist, 2 sessions, loosely framed impressions about emotional imbalance in the marriage. My attorney didn't interrupt. She waited. Then she presented the letters. 3 years of handwritten correspondence, hotel bookings under false names, explicit discussions of hiding the affair. More devastating than the intimacy were the strategy notes. Once he's promoted, we'll have operational leverage. Discretionary funds are flexible if audits remain shallow. After restructuring, ownership influence becomes symbolic. They had believed I was ornamental. The courtroom fell silent when the offshore account documentation was projected onto the screen. Transaction by transaction. $20,000 per month. 24 months. Nearly $500,000. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Kyle asked to testify. I tried to talk him out of it. "You don't have to," I told him gently the night before. "You've already carried enough." He looked at me steadily. "You taught me not to lie," he said. In court, he walked slowly, his legs still stiff but steady. The defense attorney softened her tone for him. "Kyle, did your mother love you?" "Yes," he said. "And did your father love you?" He paused. "Yes." "Then why are we here?" she asked carefully. Kyle swallowed. "Because they lied," he said. The room stilled. He continued. "I saw them once, in the kitchen, when I was 10. I told my mom. She said it was a mistake. She said if I told, it would destroy our family." His voice shook slightly but didn't break. "I thought it would be my fault if everything fell apart." A quiet gasp rippled through the gallery. That was the cost. Not money. Not reputation. A child carrying adult secrets. When the verdict came back 3 days later, it wasn't theatrical. Guilty. Embezzlement. Fraud. Conspiracy. Rita received a 4-year sentence, 2 suspended with restitution. Jordan received 3 years. The divorce settlement followed swiftly. Primary custody granted to me. Supervised visitation for Jordan upon release. Full restitution ordered. Rita lost her executive license and professional standing. As we exited the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Do you regret revealing ownership? Do you forgive them? I didn't answer. I placed my hand gently on Kyle's shoulder and walked forward. At home that evening, Claire had ordered pizza. Sophie had baked a cake that said, "Truth wins," in slightly crooked blue frosting. Emma laughed for the first time in weeks. Tyler drove us home. New license, careful hands on the wheel. We didn't talk about the trial. We talked about college applications, about baseball tryouts, about choir auditions, normal things, real things. Later, when the house was quiet, Claire stepped onto the porch beside me. "You protected them," she said softly. "I told the truth," I replied. She nodded. "That's harder." The fallout didn't feel triumphant. It felt clean. Jordan's reputation dissolved quickly. Board members distanced themselves. Former allies issued statements. The same people who once applauded his resilience now avoided his name. Rita's professional network evaporated. Silence replaced admiration. But the real consequence wasn't public. It was private. Jordan wrote letters from prison asking about the kids. Kyle chose not to respond. Emma said she didn't need another father. Tyler said he might visit someday, but not yet. Sophie asked if integrity could be inherited, or if it had to be learned the hard way. We were all rebuilding, not from scandal, from honesty. And honesty is expensive. It costs comfort. It costs illusions. But it returns something steadier. Trust earned, not assumed. 14 months after the gala, Summit's headquarters reopened in Cleveland. Modern, efficient, transparent, no hidden ownership, no silent power plays, just structure and accountability. I walked through the new facility with a different posture, not because I was wealthier, because I was visible. No more pillars, no more shrinking, no more letting someone narrate me into something smaller. And for the first time in decades, the silence in my life wasn't hiding anything. It was peaceful. 14 months after that night in the ballroom, I stood in my kitchen in Westchester. Not the old house filled with staged memories, but a smaller one we chose together. It wasn't grand. It was honest. Tyler was arguing with Sophie about whether Cornell's engineering program was harder than its business track. Kyle was taping a schedule to the fridge for baseball tryouts. Emma was humming softly while frosting cupcakes she insisted were practice, not emotional. The sound of them, laughing, bickering, living, felt real in a way our old life never had. No curated image, no secret ownership, no false modesty, just truth. One evening, Sophie came into my study and leaned against the doorframe. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" Walking onto that stage. I thought about the humiliation, the trial, the hospital lights, the DNA results, the headlines, the nights I lay awake questioning every decision. Then I thought about Kyle choosing me, about Emma saying she didn't need another father, about Tyler learning leadership without arrogance, about Sophie learning strength without cruelty. "No," I said gently. "I don't regret truth." She studied me for a moment. "You didn't shout," she said. "You just stood there." I smiled faintly. Power doesn't have to be loud. For 20 years, I believed shrinking was love. I believed silence protected people. I believed humility meant invisibility. Love without respect becomes erosion. Silence without boundaries becomes permission. And humility without honesty becomes self-erasure. The lesson wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about wealth. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about identity. If someone builds their success on diminishing you, that success was never real. If someone laughs while you're being reduced, that laughter tells you everything. And when the truth finally demands space, you don't scream. You step forward. That night at the gala didn't end my life. It ended the version of me that tolerated being small. Now, My children know who I am. I no longer hide my name, and I no longer allow anyone to narrate me into something lesser. The story of how I revealed I owned the company at my husband's promotion party is over. But the story of who I am, finally, fully, is just beginning.